Hello, we proceed with lesson 8 today of fire safety prevention. Last week we tackled fire detection and alarm systems, and today we are going to be looking at firefighting strategies. Now, after we look at detection, we are going to look at firefighting strategies, assuming that the fire is already ongoing. So, what are the strategies or what are the preparedness that we should have in place? We are also going to define a little bit of terms. We're going to define strategy, which is an overall plan for controlling an incident or a situation, and describing how, in general terms, the operation will be conducted. An overall plan or a strategy is a plan. And then we are also going to talk about tactics, which are actions or actions taken to achieve the chosen strategy, also known as tactical objective. So tactics are the action or actions taken to achieve the chosen strategy. And then we are also going to define strategic plan or incident action plan created for a specific incident based on priorities and tactical objectives. So strategic plan or incident action plan is created for a specific incident based on priorities and tactical objectives. For example, we may have a strategic fire safety emergency plan or a strategic armed robbery plan or a strategic counterterrorism plan. This is a plan created for a specific incident. Those are some of the definitions that are very important as we move ahead. We are also going to talk a little bit about application of definitions. Strategy is a broad general statement of the overall outcome to be achieved. Strategy is a broad general statement of the overall outcome to be achieved. Based on the department's standard operating guidelines, dictated by the priorities of life safety, incident stabilization, and the property conservation. So we see that the priorities, even when we come to response to fire or to fighting fire, the priorities is first of all to save life, and then to stabilize the incident, and then to minimize property damage or property conservation. And then number B, when we talk about application of definitions, tactics involve the deployment and the direction of resources, apparatus, and personnel at an incident. Tactics are applied to achieve the strategy. Involves specific tasks such as search and rescue or specific locations such as a roof. So these are what we call tactics. These are action or actions taken to achieve a particular strategy. Also, strategic plan or incident action plan addresses what is to be done, who will do it, when it will be done, where it will be done, and how it might be done. Plans are specific to the incident, may be built around standard operating procedures. Remember, when you talk about emergencies, plans are different. For example, when we talk about armed robbery attack, when we talk about fire emergency response, when we talk about firearm attack as it relates to counterterrorism, then the plans are usually different. I want to say that for fire emergency, then we have an assembly point where we gather people for the purposes of head count and to find out who is missing and who could not be at that location and how to recover these people. When we talk about search and rescue. However, when we talk about counterterrorism, when we talk about marauding terrorist firearm attack, then we don't talk about assembling people at an open assembly point because that is putting them into danger. That is exposing people into danger. We talk about hiding places or safe havens. So plans are different according to the type of emergency that you are facing. So when you come to fire emergency, the plans are usually different. When you come to terrorist attack, the plans are usually different. When you come to droning, the plans are completely different. When we come to an accident, collapse of building, how we respond, how we save people, how we save life, how we avoid going into difficult situations or risk situations, these plans are completely different. At your level, in your organization, the plans should exist to address all kinds of situations. Plans targeting specific or addressing specific emergency situations should exist in your organization, and you as a security personnel, you should be aware of these plans. So today we are talking about fire safety strategies. Priorities. Priorities fall into two categories that are integrated. Number one is incident priorities. This is life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. That is what we call incident priorities. Life safety, incident stabilization, and a property conservation. Then we talk about tactical priorities. Tactical priorities involve rescue, exposures, confinement, extinguishment, overhaul, ventilation, and salvage. Those are what we call tactical priorities. Rescue, exposures, confinement, extinguishment, overhaul, ventilation, and salvage. Strategic and tactical priorities should be addressed in the order listed. Strategic and tactical priorities should be addressed in the order listed. For example, you cannot talk of incident stabilization before you have attempted to save life. You cannot talk of property conservation before you have addressed incident stabilization. When we come to tactical priorities, you cannot talk about salvage when you have not spoken about rescue. You first have to rescue people so that you can go into salvage. Also, you cannot talk about salvage before you consider ventilation. So strategic and tactical priorities should be addressed in the order listed. Let's discuss a little bit. Risk analysis and firefighter safety have to be incorporated into the priorities. You know, we say you cannot save people, you cannot rescue people, you cannot stabilize the situation, you cannot rescue if yourself you are not safe. So we begin with risk analysis and firefighter safety. These have to be incorporated in the priorities. Lives of firefighters should not be traded when there is little or no chance of saving a civilian. A defensive or exterior attack should be considered when there are safety concerns about the integrity of a structure. Consideration must be given to the amount of time that has elapsed in the burning process prior to the initiation of fire attack, especially where truss type roof construction is involved. If the fire has been burning unhindered for at least 20 minutes, serious consideration should be given to operating in the defensive mode and out of the collapse zone. Remember, when there is fire and it is a structure, then the risk of collapse is really high. When the beams are burning and then and the weight above the building becomes unbearable, then definitely there will be collapse. So when conducting fire response, or when conducting responding to fire emergencies, you must keep in mind there is the risk of collapse. Resources. Let's talk about resources. There must be sufficient apparatus and personnel responding to the initial alarm to safely initiate the initial fire attack. It is easier to return units that are not needed than to have to call for assistance after arrival on the scene and have to wait for them. Additional resources may be called upon when the incident overwhelms the initial alarm. This is what we call second alarm. If the initial team is unable to extinguish the fire, then additional assistance may be needed to extinguish the fire. So resources. So even when planning, when thinking about your fire emergency plan, when thinking about your fire response plan, think beyond the box that in case we are overwhelmed, then how do we get resources for support? Where do we get support? How do we get support? Who do we call? Who do we connect with to get the necessary needed support resources to extinguish this fire and to save life and to respond to the situation? Apparatus responding on the initial alarm should include units and personnel to supply and apply water, protect exposure, confine fire, extinguish fire, and overhaul. Units and personnel to perform the support duties such as rescue, ventilation, salvage, ladders, lighting, and utility control. Resources must include an incident commander and a safety officer on any incident where units will be operating. Provisions must be made for a rapid intervention team crew to be in place and ready before personnel operate in an immediate dangerous to life and health environment. What we mean to say is that at your level in your organization, there must be a security team, and in the security team there must be a trained firefighters. Even some organizations select members from different departments. They form fire teams. So these are the teams that conduct the initial response, and then alarm is raised for the brigade to come and support and whatever. However, the initial responding team must keep in mind what we are talking about, that resources are very, very important when it comes to this kind of situations. Coverage should be provided for all sides from all sides of the structure. Consideration should be given to having emergency medical services available on the scene. And then for extended operations or extreme weather conditions, provisions need to be made for rehabilitation services and the rotation of personnel. Consideration should be given to having extra uncommitted units and personnel in a staging area for deployment as needed. These are some of the issues to consider as a security supervisor, as a security officer, as a security manager. You have to consider these kind of situations if you are in a fire emergency. Then fire attack. Let's look at fire attack. How do firefighters attack fire? Before any fire attack begins, civilians in danger must be rescued and removed to safety. Remember the priorities. We spoke about incident priorities, which is life safety number one. So before any fire attack begins, civilians in danger must be rescued and removed to safety. Fire attack includes getting water from the source to the scene and being able to apply it in a timely and efficient manner. There must be an ability to move sufficient quantities of water to meet the flow needs. When units are operating outside the area of a pressurized water system, additional units may be needed to rely on shuttle water. The initial arriving units should be capable of obtaining a water supply, placing one attack line in service, and providing immediate backup with a second line. So at your level as a security officer, security supervisor, when you patrol your areas and you have hydrant systems in place, be familiar with this hydrant system. If you have hose systems where we can get water, be familiar with these systems. If you have pools, we may need even to draw water from the pool using firefighting generators to draw water and pressurize water into the hydrant systems and into the hose systems and extinguish the fire. So you must be aware of these things. How is fire attacked and what is needed on the ground? The initial attack line should provide a minimum flow of 100 GPM. B, the backup line should provide a minimum flow of 200 GPM. Every effort should be made to initiate the fire attack with 2 minutes of arrival on the scene and ready for attack. The initial attack line should be directed at the fire. A second line should be advanced to the area above the fire. Additional lines may be needed for areas adjacent to the fire, while in the initial attack line for a residential structure may be 1.5 inch or 1 3/4 inch. These lines may not provide sufficient fire flow to overcome the heat production. For you as a security officer, it is just important to understand that there will be a fire brigade that responds to this situation, and they are the ones who follow these instructions. They know exactly, they have been trained exactly on how to attack the fire and how to fight the fire. For you is to provide access, for you is to remove people from danger, for you is to make sure people are not crowding, for you is to make sure that people are not taking videos and photos when the fire is burning, because that is damaging to the institute. For you is to make sure that you patrol the areas all the time to make sure that the equipments are properly secured and in place. Other consideration may need to be given to the use of 2-inch or larger lines or master streams for fire with high heat production. Attack lines being used ineffective in suppressing the fire or for commercial or large residential structures. It is better to apply large fire flows and put the fire out faster than less amounts and eventually put the fire out. So it is better to apply large water flows and put the fire out faster than lesser water flows and eventually put the fire out. So it is mostly important if you can pour a large pail of water on the fire, or if you can use a wider inch fire line, then it is much better to put out the fire faster than use little and put out the fire later. Support services. When we talk about support services, we talk about search and rescue. Although considered a support service, it is the responsibility of everyone, especially the first arriving units. May not be performed at all incidents, but there must be an assurance that everyone has been removed to a place of safety. We are talking about evacuation, and we are talking about assembly point, and we are talking about head count. And these are very challenging issues, especially to security managers and to safety officers. How to evacuate people, how to make them become orderly at an assembly point, and how to conduct assembly point immediately to determine if anybody is missing. So that if somebody is missing, then we go into search and rescue. Search and rescue must be initiated before any other operations commence. Remember the priorities. First is to save life. So we say search and rescue must be initiated before any other operations commence. May include sheltering in place or relocation rather than removal. Ventilation. Needed whenever there is smoke in the structure. You remember from the initial lessons, we spoke at length about smoke and the dangers of smoke in a fire emergency. So smoke needed whenever there is smoke in the structure. Ventilation is needed whenever there is smoke in the structure. Coordinate with the fire attack. Consider impact on the spread through premature initiation, improper placement or type of building construction. Consider stage of fire development. Is it in incipient, free burning, smoldering, as well as potential backdraft or flashover condition. Consider placement and timing of ventilation in relation to objective, rescue or fire attack. Salvage. Salvage, mostly, we are just talking about strategies. These are the things that you have to keep in mind. You have to keep in mind that there has to be ventilation. You have to keep in mind priorities. You have to keep in mind salvage. Salvage can be incorporated into initial attack where entry and water application is involved. Can be more than throwing covers, respect for property of others, and not causing more damage than the fire. So salvage is actually what we call minimizing damage, or property conservation. Salvage is actually ensuring that you can control the number of properties that are damaged in the fire situation. And then salvage is the protection of buildings and their contents from unnecessary damage due to water, smoke, and other elements, both during and after a fire. Efficiently performed salvage work can allow families to continue living in their homes within a few hours after a fire has occurred, with irreplaceable personal effects and property intact. Salvage starts with the initial fire attack as that begins to reverse destruction. Depending on the resources available, certain salvage efforts can take place during the fire attack, but typically salvage takes place simultaneously with overhaul. Salvage covers and taps range in size. There are usually salvage covers and salvage taps that are used in the fire emergencies to try and to minimize more damage to property. We say salvage is the protection of buildings and their contents from unnecessary damage due to water, smoke, and other elements, both during and after a fire. You also have to consider ladders. In fact, at your work area, you have to consider whether there are ladders, especially in high-rise building, necessary to support rescue or fire attack efforts. Use as secondary means of escape for personnel operating inside the structure above ground level or on a roof. Should have at least 2 ladders in place when ladders being used, one for regular use and one for emergency escape should the escape path be cut off. Lighting. Lighting is needed to improve the safety of the working area. Should be considered for interior or on any instances and for exterior when it is not daylight. Light the scene as well as specific work areas. Do not place lights in places of heavy personnel traffic. So lighting is also needed. So you must also make sure that at your workplace there are, apart from the emergency lighting system inside the building, security should also be in possession of lighting systems. Torches are very important. Powerful torches, spotlights are very important, because if we go into a situation at night and you need to move from one area to the other and it is in pitch darkness, then you need to have a ready lighting systems. Also, again, you remember in fire emergencies, it is usually recommended to switch off the main power switch. So when you switch off the main power switch, the main lighting system will go off. So what will remain on is the emergency lighting, which is usually separate from the main lighting system. So you'll be able to see, but at a minimal view. So you need also to have handy portable lighting systems like torches. And then also utility control. When we talk of utility control, talk of necessary when utilities are contributing to the fire or maybe an ignition source or safety hazard. May include shutting off electricity from panel or shutting off natural gas at the meter. Electric meter should not be removed or wires cut out. May require assistance from utility company. So remember also security, you have to know where the main power switch is, where the controls for the gas storage is. You have to familiarize with this location so that if we are in a situation, if we need to cut off gas, then security, you are asking each other, and how can we do this? How can we do this? We need to switch off main electricity. Where is the main? Where you should in advance know the location of these areas. These are very important to security operations, that you are familiar with these systems and how to shut them off. Conclusion. At the conclusion of the above portion of the drill, now we are talking about a drill. For example, if you're doing a drill practice, consideration should be given to conducting a tabletop simulation or a chalkboard exercise to apply the basic strategy and tactic principles to specific structures in the response area. This will provide an opportunity to make sure that everyone understands the principles as well as share information about specific structures in the response area. There may be personal knowledge that would be beneficial to others in attendance. So apart from conducting just a drill, and preparing for a fire emergency, we may also need to conduct a tabletop simulation or a chalkboard exercises to apply the basic strategy. What I mean to say is that at every level of any organization or any facility, there should be a strategy, a plan for responding to fire. These plans are usually different depending on the size of the location, the structure, depending on the number of people present at the structure at any one time, depending whether it is a high rise or it is a low lying structure, depending on the location, depending on the type of operation, there must be a specific plan at every facility covering a response to fire emergency. It is the responsibility of security. It is the responsibility of security manager to come up with these plans. It is the responsibility of security manager to sit down with these people and to draft these plans and submit them to the top management for approval. Let's turn our attention to important points to consider during fire emergencies. Important points to consider. Number one, utilizing pre-incident plans. Pre-incident plans. Information collected during building pre-plans must be included when establishing incident priorities and safety stroke tactics. They can help you to determine what structural elements protect occupants, location and number of exits, location of escalators or elevators, location of windows or other openings suitable for rescue access, special evacuation consideration for disabled occupants, the elderly or large number of occupants, flammable and toxic interior finishes or processes. What potential life hazards do firefighters face? Flammable or combustible liquids are very hazardous to firefighters. Toxic elements are very hazardous to firefighters. Explosives are very hazardous, and reactive materials are very hazardous, and also radioactive materials. This means that when you are responding to a fire situation, whether you are a security officer at a particular organization and there is fire, you immediately become a firefighter and you are responding. You should be on the lookout for flammable or combustible liquids, toxic chemicals, explosives, reactive materials, and radioactive materials. Those are some of the hazards. And then also we have to consider also physical condition of the structure. When we are responding to a fire situation, we have to consider physical condition of the structure, components that could fall during a fire, construction materials that might lose their strength during a fire, ornamental building. I don't know, but unsupported partitions or walls, roof construction, high piled stock, significant live or dead load to the roof support structure, heavy items. These are things that you should take into consideration during patrols when there is no fire. You take note of the type of roof construction. You take note of them, where items are highly piled or stocked in stores. You take note of building features that could confuse or trap firefighters, large open areas, dead-end corridors or hallways. You know, there are other corridors that leads nowhere. These are called dead-end corridors or hallways, open vats, pits or shafts, openings into underground utility shafts or tunnels, multi-level floor arrangements, alterations that disguise the original construction. These are things that you should take note of as you are planning your fire emergency plans. And then you also have on-scene capabilities. Taking all of the information gleaned from pre-planning, the fire ground commander is ready to face the dynamic process of fighting a fire. When there is a fire, definitely the security manager becomes the fire ground commander until the fire brigade team arrives. The initial information gives the incident commander the ammunition they need to make educated decisions about the structure based on the best available information regarding the structure itself, its its use and layout. A 360-degree walk around of the incident scene should note the condition of the emergency and potential hazards to personnel. The incident commander should remind themselves of the existing building construction to assist with anticipating fuel load, fire spread, and potential structural weak points. Note the site, the size, placement, and movement of the fire. Catalog how long the fire has been burning and its impact on the structure. Greater than 15 to 20 minutes should cause the incident commander to consider the need for an immediate change to a defensive strategy. What is the condition of the structure at this time? Project that area required for need to establish collapse zones for 1.5 times the height of the structure. Based on the pre-plan and the size up, the IC commander now begins to build an incident action plan. This is usually what happens. You have to take into consideration condition of the building, the type of operation that goes on there, the number of people on site at each particular time, and the neighborhood also, and how to approach fighting the fire, beginning with the priorities of saving life, incident stabilization, and also property conservation. We also talk of take note that this is not the time to pull forms out of a folder to fight a fire, but an incident action plan outlines 3 essentials. What do I have? What do I need to do? Do I have enough staff to get it done? An incident action plan is very important. Incident action plan is very important at work areas. Surprisingly, if you go to most organizations and you are told to do a security survey or security analysis, conduct this kind of vulnerability tests and check equipment that are in place, and documents, you will find that these plans are missing. And yet we have security managers, we have assistant security managers, we have security directors. But I can tell you for sure from my own experience that we are sometimes very reluctant or very weak at coming up with this action plan. So it is for us to train you, to teach you that these things are important. And when you go back to your place work area, and when you develop deep into the career, you remember that under fire safety management, we need incident action plans for fire safety. What do I have in place? What do I need to do? And do I have enough staff to get it done? Those are some of the questions. Don't forget that an initial arriving apparatus basically develops an incident action plan when they pull up and see fire, establish a supply line, stretch an attack line, and put out the fire. They just did not take the time to pull out the forms and write down the steps. So the steps should be in your mind. There is no time to go back to the documents to start reading. You are in an emergency. You have to save life. You have to control this to stabilize the situation. You have to minimize property destruction. There is no time for you to go back to the forms. It should be in your mind. These things should be in your mind, and you can only get them right if you do periodic drills and periodic exercises. If scene appears to be moving beyond a first alarm of fire, an incident action plan in written form can be started. Utilizing tactical check-off sheets are minimal incident action plans that help to ensure things don't get forgotten. Initial strategy and tactics include apparatus placement, use of attack and support hose lines, ventilation procedures, rescue operations, foreseeable entry operations, forcible entry operations, and establishment of a command structure. So these things usually happen simultaneously. They happen simultaneously that you have in place the firefighting apparatus ready, then ventilation procedures, then rescue operation, forcible entry operations, and establishment of command structures. Strategy and tactics will be based on the need to prioritize the typical RCEO acronym elements. And these acronym elements are rescue, to include search and removal of victims, exposure protection, confining the fire, extinguishing the fire, overhaul after the fire has been controlled. Overhaul after the fire has been controlled. So remember, the acronym for RCEO involves rescue, exposure, confining, extinguishing, and overhaul. And then also we have a new acronym which is now coming up into the operations of responding to fire situations, and it involves rescue first, then exposure, then confinement, then rapid intervention. Can't speak strongly enough about having established as early as possible, and then extinguishment, and then ventilation as needed, and then overhaul, and then salvage. These are just some of the procedures, some of the words you need to keep in mind as a security officer. You may instantly become a firefighter, and you need to know these things. And then we say risk benefit. Initial strategy and tactics should be decided upon based on the risk being presented to the crews, not only at the onset of the initial decision making, but also projected forward to include what could be happening in the next 10 minutes. You must be very sharp to assess the situation and make conclusions that in the next 10 minutes this will be happening. Likely this building will collapse. Likely there will be more smoke here. Likely there will be explosions because we have fuel tanks inside that structure. So you must be able to project forward to include what could be happening in the next 10 minutes. The incident commander must determine what hazards are present, what risks exist to personnel, what chances exist that something could go wrong, as I have talked about explosions, and what benefits could be gained by choosing one strategy over another. Because if you consider that your strategy of directly going into the situation is more risky, then you may choose another structure of spreading out and approaching the rescue and life-saving issues from a different perspective or from a different side. So these are some of the information that you need to keep in mind. This is what happens during fire emergencies. There is usually an incident commander, and this incident commander must be able to make decisions as fast as possible to save life and ensure that people are rescued. And then risk assessment, we all know about this one, ensures that all members operating on incident scene understand the incident action plan and are conforming to it. It should be conducted periodically throughout an incident, especially when strategic objectives are reached, such as primary search completed, fire knockdown, patient extraction completed, hazardous material spills or leaks contained. The incident commander should conduct a risk analysis during even the fire prior to initiating any action on the incident scene, upon any change in strategy, upon any major event in the incident, upon a change in the incident commander. So this is what usually happens when firefighters approach your area. They also have this information for you as a security officer, as a security manager, is to give them access and to support them with your knowledge, your experience, and also the people you have that can do this job. And then special considerations. There are special circumstances that may impact the incident commander's selection of strategy. These are things that all fireground commanders should keep at the back of their minds when applying the risk management planning process. Civil unrest may require an increase in police protection for on-scene fire resources. And then long-term events or those occurring during adverse weather conditions may require additional logistical needs. Procedures for auxiliary power and lighting should be anticipated for night operations. If the structure is under renovation, questions the underlying structural stability. If the odds are high that lightweight trusses are utilized in the structure, reduce your life imprisonment time to 10 to 15 minutes to be safe. reduce your fire impingement time to 10 to 15 minutes to be safe. And then summary, a strategy, as we have said, is an overall plan for controlling an incident or a situation and describing how, in general terms, the operation will be conducted. Tactics are actions or action taken to achieve the chosen strategy, also known as tactical objective. And then strategic plan or incident action plan, plan created for a specific incident based on priorities and tactical objectives. So we have said in conclusion that these strategies are different. Strategic plans for responding to fire emergencies are different in all organizations at all facilities. It is your responsibility to make sure they exist. They exist. And it is your responsibility also, when you become a security manager, to make sure that people are trained to conduct drills and people know what to do in the event that there is a fire and what type of strategies will be used. For example, at a particular facility, strategy number one is to raise the alarm and make an assessment. Can I extinguish this fire? If not, what is the next step? Call fire brigade. How do we reach fire brigade? How do we get their contact? How do we raise the alarm? So these are some of the thinking that should be included in the fire plan. What equipments do we have? Do we have enough fire extinguishers? Do we have an hydrant system? Is the hydrant system working? If the hydrant system is working, is it pressurized? These are some of the things that you need to keep in mind as a security professional who is in charge of a particular facility. I want to say that thank you once again. We are moving to the close of this course, so there are remaining only 2 lessons that we are going to discuss this coming weekend. So I would like this weekend, if possible, we cover 2 lessons, and then next weekend, the final one, we cover also 2 lessons, and then we prepare for the exams. So thank you very much. I will speak to you again very soon, and I want to say bye-bye.